Further, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that when you see something wrong being done, first stop it with your hands. Directly, end it, finish it. If you can't stop it with your hands because of the situation, speak out against it with your mouth. At least alert other people to the fact that something is wrong and something should be done about it. And then the third thing is, if you can't stop it with your hands and you can't speak out against it with your mouth, then hate it in your heart. But this is the weakest form of resistance. The Islamic movement, the big ideas that should be coming from the Islamic movement, should be about enlarging the humanity of man, improving the way that we are treated, proposing alternatives to the things that hurt people most in daily life. Islam shouldn't just be about educating people. Islam should be about getting rid of the cost of education, or dropping it to a point where everybody can see it, which is not the case today. Islam shouldn't be just about reducing the interest on mortgages. Islam should be about doing away with them entirely. Islam should look at employment in very similar terms to the way Islam looked at slavery, by saying if somebody works for somebody else for 50 years and still can't afford to make basic life decisions for himself, although he is not a slave in law, he is a slave in reality. And just as Islam hated the one, Islam should hate the other. Muslims should be at the forefront of talking about the biggest problems in this world, and at the forefront of sponsoring any man who has a solution. Why are people overweight? We know why people are overweight. People are overweight because of A, they eat too much, and also B, we put things in food that shouldn't be in food because we don't want the food to go bad in the natural time that it should go bad. We might bring a grape from South America all the way, or a banana from Africa all the way to New York City. And so we do things to our food, like pick it before it's ripe, or inject chemicals to make it shelf stable. These chemicals have bad effects on people. And so most of the population is fat. And Muslims don't do anything about saying, how do we change the food supply? How do we change the logistics systems? How do we sponsor railroads? And you say, wait a minute, why are we responsible for those things? And I say to you, the big idea is because God said so. Because God said so. The biggest difference between Islam and every religion that came before it and all of the religions that came after it was its ability to implant within the heart of man the idea that he was accountable for the world. Prophet Ibrahim, who was the forefather of our religion and one of the first among many Muslims, although Adam alayhi salam was the first Muslim, Prophet Ibrahim had a father who built idols. A father who profited from the creation of false gods. It's amazing. His father was in the business of creating something offensive to God, and yet his son, who one might have predicted would follow in his father's footsteps, was the foremost opponent of this kind of foolishness. And his son was the one who built the Kaaba in Mecca, which would be the place at which the oneness of God would be celebrated for all time. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. So Muslims understand deep within their heart that if Abraham or Ibrahim could rise from the position of being the son of an idolater to being the one who smashed the idols and caused them to be discredited, then it is within the power of anyone, any one man, any one person, to change the world. And this became the Sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the people who misused and abused power, even though they were among him, his friends even, and said, no, you have to stop. He spoke for people who had nothing, orphans, widows, women, people who would never have power in that particular society. In fact, people who were treated worse than animals in some cases in society, inherited against their will. In some aspects of Arab society at the time, you had more rights with an animal than you did necessarily with women. You should look it up and see what I'm saying. And into that society came a man who said, no, it's all got to change. Why? Did he have 6,000 people in a sleeper cell waiting to follow his instructions? Did he have CNN waiting to broadcast his latest videotape on which Quraysh tent to bomb? No. What he had was the force of his own example, the integrity of his character, and the willingness to talk, even one person at a time, to other people, to build what was right. And slowly but surely, he attracted other people. It didn't happen overnight. But he got them to understand that what they thought was their own best interest was wrong. And because it was wrong, it needed to stop. The message of the Sunnah, the big idea of the Sunnah, is that every one person can change the world. Maybe it won't be for every one person to change it for 1400 years, the way Rasulullah has done. That's a very difficult record to match. But even if we changed it for 100 years, the way Salahuddin Ayyubi did, or even if we change it for 1,000 years in a field, the way Al-Khwarizmi did with algebra, or the way that the chemists did with chemistry, or the way Muslim doctors did with medicine and antiseptics. It falls to each of us that we have the opportunity to change the world, that all life is sacred, and that if the things that we look to change must be those things that hurt those people who are forgotten. Now today it's easy to look for the forgotten because everybody is forgotten. We see even the rich are suffering with poor family structures, with drug addiction, with alcohol. But you never hear of a Muslim approach to rehabbing people from alcohol. And we say, wait a minute, we don't drink. Yes, but our brothers and sisters in humanity do. And they suffer terribly for it. They suffer terribly for it. Physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. The whole society suffers when 1% of it or 2% of it drinks, or when 10% of it is depressed, or when 5% of it has cancer. And you don't hear about Muslims sponsoring a cancer institute. Even if every doctor in there was Jewish and Christian and Hindu, you don't see Muslims sponsoring a cancer institute to say, this is affecting our brothers and sisters in humanity. This is something we have trillions of dollars in wealth coming from, and this is not something we do anything about. You don't see Muslims saying, this is how you get rid of alcohol or drug addiction. Because this is a cancer, a different kind of cancer, that's hurting people, that's causing people to kill each other, that's causing people to lose their minds. And this is something that if we cannot stop with our own hands, because the society has decided they want to allow this, we can speak out against it, which some of us do, but we can also do what we can to try to stop it from taking over all of the lives of people. And you don't see this. One brother has started an education, Khan Academy, completely voluntarily. You have a situation where you can go and you can learn anything in mathematics, from elementary school all the way to fourth year MIT. He put videos explaining everything in mathematics. Any kid, anyone, anywhere who has access to a computer can get the best possible mathematics education. Subhanallah for that brother, Pakistani brother. Now people are starting to use it. It started because his cousin was asking him for help in mathematics, and she was far away from him, so he gave the help. He put it on YouTube. Now millions of people can get an education in mathematics, regardless of if they go to school or not, free on the internet. My question is, why haven't Muslims come and given this man $1 billion? He is already doing it for free. His heart is pure. He never asked anyone for any money. So he could do this with chemistry and physics and biology and history and every other field that he possibly could. The brother already started. He already put hundreds of thousands of hours of problem sets and questions and videos and testing. But nobody from the Muslim world has stepped up and said, you know what? We have billions of dollars. This man has come up with a way where even if people have no teacher, they can still go to school. And he's not charging them and putting them in debt and making them broke. And we don't support this brother. This is why, because we don't think that it's our obligation to support anyone who fixes what is evil in this world. So the big idea of Islam, just the idea that all human life is sacred, opens up to us 1,000 different avenues to help people. Whether or not we have a Muslim government, the Islamic movement is about more than government. This is what I've been trying to say over and over again. Government is important, yes. We have seen what happens when government isn't important in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Morocco, anywhere. We have seen what happens. Our American brothers and sisters have seen what happens when they elected Bush. What can happen when you get the wrong kind of government to even the richest country in the world. They've seen with their own two eyes. In history, we know what happened when Pharaoh was given charge of Egypt. What can happen when you have incompetent government? We know this. I'm not saying government isn't important, but I'm saying that part of how you get to government, and part of how you influence government, and part of how you limit government from stealing too much from the people is that you have a society. And a society is built at the level of what happens in the individual's heart, what he expects for himself, and what he expects for his neighbor. If you expect nothing for yourself and nothing for your neighbor, then you will have the kind of leaders that we have had. But if you expect everything for your neighbor and something for yourself, you will not allow those kinds of governments to occur, because the people would be afraid to take power from those kinds of people. Somebody once told me a joke about Switzerland. They don't really have an army as far as I understand it, but everybody is in the military in Switzerland, military service. Every Swiss man has a gun in his home and is trained to use it. I don't see anybody looking to mount a military coup in Switzerland. I don't think the man would last 5 minutes. Couldn't walk down the street, because the entire society has the ability to protect itself and has an expectation that things will move, if you pardon the expression, like a Swiss watch. The trains will come on time, the taxis will go where they will go. We can learn something from this in terms of the power of expectation. We expect very little for our neighbors. And because we expect very little for our neighbors, when they get very little, we aren't too upset. But you cannot have government as we have had if you still understand the meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Although sometimes it takes all of us an episode like what happened to me in the Walmart to be reminded of this. The sunnah of big ideas is to look at what Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did to the world, to look at the order in which he did it, and to say to yourself, if I am to be the follower and one who loves this man, then I should do the things that he did, or I should try to do those things, or worst, I should at least try to follow those things if other people are doing them, and encourage those other people to do them, and research what those things are, and get behind them in some kind of way. This is the sunnah of big ideas. This is the sunnah you should be telling your children about. This is the expectation you should set in them. Not that they get up in the morning, they get a job, they put a roof over their head, and they go to sleep. This is not the sunnah of big ideas. The sunnah of big ideas is that as quickly as possible, they have no debt, they can support themselves, their family, and everyone they love and care for. And as soon as possible, they find other Muslims who are in the same situation, and they start thinking about how the whole society could be in the same place. Because food has no taste in your mouth if your brother is hungry. Wealth has no taste in your wallet if your brother is poor. Your prayer has limited value to you if everywhere around you people are worshiping idols and going to bed drunk. What value is your love for God if you cannot ensure that other people feel the same love from God to them? This is the sunnah of big ideas, the idea that our being placed here or anywhere where we are in the world is an act of mercy by God to that place. We are God's mercy to this country if we act according to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. If we make it our business to see that people who have no education here get it, that people who have no business prospects achieve them, that people whose families don't talk to each other are reconciled, that people who are old are protected, that people are young are hopeful and stay away from bad things that hurt them, we will become the instrument of God's love to a place that is losing it before its very eyes. And if you think of yourself in that fashion, your own behavior will correct itself. How can you tell people to stay away from alcohol and sponsor them from if you yourself are, God forbid, drinking? How can you tell people and bring families together if you treat your own family in a negative way? How can you teach people if your own kids can't read, or the person praying beside you has trouble with this language, and so on and so forth? We are the instruments of God's mercy in this country. We are the instruments of God's mercy in every country. Ours is to defend the promise of a dream that will not die. And that is the dream that all mankind is made better from having known us, the way a man who is sweating feels better when he takes a bath in a river. They say when people met Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it was like they took a shower. They felt so clean just by meeting him.